no one will hire her once they find out she's in prison, which is a thing that happens. She also makes the dumbest comment. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is how Colleen Hoover don't know. She says there is a double standard for women who were in prison and men who were in prison. Where men who were in prison, on top of having the oh my god, what do? They get social currency of being a cool badass that women in prison don't get. So women in prison get all the negative association, but don't get badass association.
It's so stupid.
I have never heard that in my life. Oh.
It's...
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and with me today, my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm rugged, I'm handsome, I'm William. And what book are we doing today, Maria?
Reminders of Him? Is that what it's called?
Yes, it is called Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, the infamous. And what happened with this book is that there is a Colleen Hoover TV show. I forget which. It Ends With Us, I believe, is the book that it's based off of. So we were like, oh, we should read that to, keep up with the culture. And the thing is, though, that book is basically just abuse apologia, from what I understand. And neither of us really wanted to read that, and so we decided to read this book instead, because the synopsis is bananas. And I think this is actually a good thing that we read this one, because I think it gives a better sort of a better example of the complete mediocrity of her writing without of the whole other social aspect of it that you have to take into account with abuse apologia. And so I will let Maria explain the premise.
This book is also, I don't know why I thought Colleen Hoover wrote silly, trashy romances. Apparently she writes melodramatic romances. Just I want to preface this because what we're diving into is some big melodrama.
For some reason, I thought she wrote, more rom-com-y stuff, but no, it's more Nicholas Sparks than Love Hypothesis.
This book is about our main character, Kenna, has recently been released from prison and is going back to the town that her boyfriend of 6 months, when she was like 20 or 21, they got into a car accident while she was driving because they were under the influence, and she thought he was dead when she stumbled out of the car and kind of had a panic attack, but turned out he was alive, and because she stumbled out of the car and left him, it's manslaughter, so she goes to prison. And also, she got pregnant, and her baby was taken from her while she was in prison and was raised by her dead boyfriend's parents, and she no longer has any rights to her children. The book doesn't tell it to you this way. This is just a synopsis. And she goes back to the town that her daughter is being raised in, also the town that her public trial, well, not public, but her very publicly known trial and the murder of this, he was a town sweetheart, everybody knew this guy. And, he died tragically and everybody blamed her for it.
And because she didn't cry in the trial, everyone's like, oh, what a heartless B word. She must have murdered him in cold blood.
She didn't care about him. She ran away to protect herself. What a terrible person. But she specifically wants to get to know her child. She's never met her child. She gave birth. They took the baby away. It was a preemie, so she didn't even get to hold her. Nothing. And she's here to establish a relationship, and then she falls for her previous boyfriend's best friend. And
who now is like a surrogate father to her child, who is named the absolutely brilliant Maria. What is her child named?
DM.
Carpe Diem.
That's not her name. Her name isn't Carpe Diem. Her name is Diem. The reason you think that is because there's one point where she's like, let's Carpe fucking Diem. And basically she named her child as she thought about naming her child. She knew she wasn't going to get the rights to her child because before her child was even born, her dead boyfriend's family was like, we'll raise the child, but we're taking away all parental rights. You have zero rights, and, you know, you can never see your child. And she was like, I need to pick a name that sees the day, sees DM. And also, just DM is not a good name. Don't name your kids DM. I can see that being something they get made fun of a lot. Like, it's just not in elementary school. I don't think elementary schoolers. I don't think elementary schoolers would be hip, would understand the name. They'd just be like, "Oh, someone's named DM." But middle schoolers, I think that's where you'd start getting some flack. But anyway, that's the premise of the book. And I did not enjoy this book. So as those of you who have been hanging out here long enough know, I'm not like just romance as a like books that are just romances are not my bag. They're absolutely other people's bags, and I completely understand the need for that because a younger Maria did like just romance books, you know? I liked romance fantasy books, but like I was absolutely fine with something where the purpose of it was the romance. But the Nicholas Sparks style drama romances where like you should cry or the characters cry a lot and there's like a deep dark reason why it's not going to work out, or it just any of that was
they
never...
make Maria turn Eastern European.
None of that is my genre. So going into this, I very quickly, like in chapter 1, I was like, oh god, this was not, because I didn't read the premise. I didn't read the
you never do that.
I never read it.
You just trust me.
Yeah, if you don't know this, I don't read shit. Will goes, this is what we're reading. I opened a book and I start listening to and or reading the ebook. That's it. I don't. So I had no idea. I start reading it and I go, oh, this is not going to be silly, good, fun times. You know, this isn't silly, fun times. This is sad, sack, drama times. This is sad, sack, drama times. That's what this is. And again, I understand that this is absolutely a genre that some people like. They like their romances with a little bit with the angst, with the like not a fun will they won't they, but can they will they? Will the world allow them? Like some people like that, and that is 100% valid. And I'm not here to take this away from you, but this is a review channel, and I'm gonna talk about how I interacted with this book. And this ain't my genre, peeps. This ain't it.
I went in and initially reading it, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be as bad as I thought. Like, maybe this will be okay-ish.
Yeah.
Because I think, weirdly enough, I am more romantic than Maria. And I'll say that and I'll stand by that. I've read many fanfics that are just two characters slowly falling in love over 300 pages. Like, straight romance is okay to me. Also, heterosexual romance. So I was like, okay, this isn't totally... It is a little weird not to have, like, a plot about the world or something going on at the same time, but I was like, okay, I can acclimate to this. Here's the thing with this book that's really bizarre. The author is allergic to genuine conflict, and there is a level of essentialism going on that's really weird, and the book overall is just very flat. Like, all the scenes you would think would happen with woman comes back after having murdered her boyfriend and has to get the grandparents of her child to accept her as the mother. Like, all the things you would think, like, oh, okay, what would that look like between them? What would be the arguments? What would be integrating into her child's life be like after this much time? You know, what would the boyfriend think in terms of, dealing with the grief of the boyfriend, and, like, was it really his fault because they were smoking the ganja? All of that stuff you would expect, not in the book. The book is just, Kenna is a sad sack, and why can't people forgive her already?
So there's a couple of things. That is the biggest one. What Will just said, the lack of knowing how to handle conflict. This book builds up a confrontation that is dealt with in 5 pages. Like 70% of the book is just building up to something that should be a significant conflict, and it is dealt with immediately and with zero pain. Like, there's no dramatic fallout. Like, there's 2 ways you could have handled this book, and I'll talk about the 2 ways you could have written this in a way that I think would have worked a bit better for what the book was trying to do. But my other problem is this book functions off of something that I think really robs it of its ability to work well, which is it hits you with the instant love, the instant infatuation. And I think for this story, because basically you have our main character, Ledger. Also, where Ledger, Kenna? Where are you getting these names? DM? Like, anyway, Ledger is Scotty. Scotty's the guy that died's best friend from when he was young. They lived across the street from each other. And Ledger has been a, like, best friend father figure to DM, the little girl being raised by Scotty's parents. And they all have a really negative image of Kenna. And by making it instant infatuation before he knows who Kenna is, it robs the narrative of having genuine moments where he thinks differently about her. Because the vibe from the start is because he's into her, he wants to think differently about her. He's already primed by being into her, by finding her incredibly compelling, because it's not instant love where they're immediately in love with each other, but they're instantly into and compelled by each other in a very intense way. But it makes it that all the moments where he goes, oh wow, she's not how I expected, feel a bit less significant than they could be. And if you're going to write this, like if you're genuinely going to write this story, you need to embrace the hard parts of this. The fact that it should have taken him much longer to turn around on her. It should have, there should have been conflict. She should have, like, the amount of stuff she should have had to, because, like, a lot of the problems is all the terrible things she really had to deal with happened prior to this book starting. And for the most part, things go really well for her. Like, she wouldn't agree with that, but really well with her. Like, there's never actually a confrontation with the grandparents. There's never actually, like, nobody ever yells at her and is like, yo, which, you know, that's what should happen in this, but, like, that's what the book was setting up. Like, there was supposed to be this, and by having the insta-love with Ledger, you deny even that relationship working as well as it should have been. By having that instant infatuation, and again, everybody knows, I'm a slow burn bitch, okay? And frankly, this book could have used a little bit of a slow burn, a little bit of an enemies to lovers flavor. I hate to say it, but it could have used this. This book could have used an enemies to lovers development, okay? And instead, they're just immediately into each other, but and so it's more like forbidden lovers. Like, if you had to assign a trope, it's a forbidden lovers, and that just doesn't work for, like, again, what Will said is 100% true. This book is conflict averse. Hugely. Any slight amount of tension is immediately dealt with. Immediately.
It's a weird book, because again, you would expect there to be more melodrama or even just basic conflict in it, and also because, like, that's how you generate angst, really. But the book doesn't do that. Again, all, like Maria was saying, all of that happened before. And again, I think this, and the thing is, as I was reading this book, I was like, oh, there are so many more interesting ways to tell this story, but they would all require Kenna not to be a perfect character. And the thing is that again is something that Colleen Hoover is just like, no, she's great. Everybody should just forgive her. The reason is is their own emotional problems that we have to respect, but are also stupid. And everyone also is, like, a little too perfect. And also, her prose are so bad. So there's this thing that happens where she'll just state line by line, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And that is such a beginner to mistake to make in your prose. It's bizarre that she is this popular and got away with it, and an editor wasn't like, this is repetitive, you need to break this up.
And her syntax is very on top of the start of her sentences being repetitive, her syntax in general is just very repetitive. It reminded me of you saw the folding. I mean, of course, the folding ideas where he reads the angry gamer, James
Rolfe, the angry video game nerd,
and how the sentences are all just like straight subject verb. Like, just really, and Colleen Hoover is not that bad, but definitely has some repetitive sentence structure going on here. And so what the book has going for it is the tension it is creating and the drama it is creating out of its premise. But the book doesn't deliver on it. And so it saps what is a, like, if you're here for the drama, I'm going to argue you don't actually get it.
And this is, like, not a good romance. That's the other thing, is, like Maria said, there's very little chemistry between the two characters. Because the thing is, I went into this going, okay, this is wish fulfillment, you know what I mean? Like, this is going to be straight up wish fulfillment for girlies who like their romances. And this is not it. I would argue many of the books we've read that were more annoying than this at least handled the romance a little bit better. Like, there's books, this to an extent was just sort of harmless by being a blob of nothingness. But by virtue of that, there's also so little going on with the two characters besides Kenna being really, really hot. Also, something I need to mention, the way this woman writes prison is so clearly white lady who read an article once about Martha Stewart being in prison and has no idea the rest, what even vaguely prison is like. Like, at one point, Kenna's like, yeah, no, I prefer to call it the facility. And I'm like, really? Not any jargon or slang that she picked up inside? That's it?
Nothing. No, there is no jargon. It's like Kenna went to prison and interacted with one lady and never had a single conversation or interaction with a single other person.
It's very odd, and it just, again, it's like she did no research on this. It genuinely feels like she just wrote down and tapped this out in a month and was like, publish, I'm gonna make millions.
Yeah, that very much is the vibe, because the idea of having a character whose formative young adult years are spent in prison, but who is determined to make a go of trying to be a proper mother to their daughter that they've never actually met, is a compelling setup. But even then, I'm like, you just rocked up? Like, let me just tell you this. It's not like she was like, okay, I'm going to work for a year, save a decent amount of money, get myself... She rocks up, is in a efficiency with a blow-up mattress, zero money to her name, and not like on just like a logical level, if I was in a position where I needed to prove myself to a bunch of people, because not only do they hate her because they blame her for the death of their son, and because of how it happened, they think she abandoned him to die on the side of the road, and if she had called 911 when the crash first happened, he would have lived. But they also just didn't like her when they first met her. She seemed like a fast and loose, corrupting influence on their perfect, good town homeboy.
For some reason, she thought it'd be a good idea to wear a low-cut shirt to a family dinner. Like, not to victim blame or whatever, but, like, that doesn't seem realistic. Like, that doesn't seem like a thing a real person would do.
Yeah, especially with how thoughtful she is at every point in the book with him, with a bunch of stuff. Like... just there's a ton of things. Or how, like, she holds Scotty's cigarette for him while he goes to do something, and then his mom comes, and instead of being like, yo, you need to tell your mom that you smoke because she currently thinks I smoke, and I got flack for this, and he's like, there's no actual way. Like, listen, sometimes when you meet people's parents, it's hard. Sometimes their parents can be intimidating. Sometimes their parents can be, like, they can have judgments. But this is a gorgeous white girl meeting a white family, you know? Like, it's not like there's any other, like, you know, and they don't know that she comes from a not great family or a not great background. She is in full control of what her first impression, she's not dealing with any racial biases, which are real. Anyone who has been in an interracial relationship knows that there are a ton of things you guys have to navigate in that. She's not dealing with, like, there's so many biases that she's not, like, all you had to do was, like, just be like, I'm meeting his his parents, who he's described a ton of times. He talks about his parents a lot. What am I... And the reason she wore the low-cut top was because it was his favorite.
And see, the thing is, there's a lot of small things like that. Like, we're going on about it, but, like, that, there's a lot of small things like that in the book that don't feel like a real person wrote it. The way, I swear to God, the way she writes children is, tell me you've never interacted with children without telling me. And I think she actually has children. But the way she writes the DM is so stupid and just child... Like, not... She's childish writing it. DM doesn't feel childish. She feels like a manic pixie child.
Yeah, just gonna say that she feels like a manic pixie dream girl as a toddler.
Yeah, this is the inception years.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the like Kenna's background we'll figure out is real. She had a real tough childhood. And it's weird because she doesn't feel like she grew up with that, and she doesn't later on have the markers of that in terms of how she deals with relationships. Like, her mother kind of abandoned her, and she doesn't really necessarily have that very keen, like, oh my god, everyone's gonna abandon me feeling. Like, I have friends who have had very rough childhoods, one of which you guys know, and she'd be fine with me saying it. So
it impacts how they interact with things to this day
quite a lot. And but the thing is, Kenna never feels like that, and that's because her childhood is just sort of cheap angst that didn't have to happen on screen. And that's kind of the thing that I think is sort of insidious about this book, is there's a lot of small problematic things because Colleen Hoover is such an incompetent writer.
I think we've done enough at this point to set up the basic. Obviously, we didn't like this book. If you liked it, maybe don't watch this. I should have said this earlier.
Yeah, the thing is, people often watch our videos and are like, do you guys only hate videos? No. We have a whole playlist called Yes, We Like Books. I'll try to remember to put it up there. Yep, all right. Maria, what was the latest book we read that we liked?
Shogun? Well, I read
Shogun.
Yeah, that was one where we liked it. And it's doing terribly, so go watch it. And then before that, you and Katie read... There was a couple you and Katie read that you really liked.
I'm totally blanking on what they are, and I refuse to go check the list. Like, if this book had been good, I would have been able to make a good thumbnail that was like, Colleen Hoover, actually good writer. So it's not like we're incentivized necessarily to make this a video where we hate on the book.
The Witcher?
The Witcher, we all kind
of... the Scorpion?
Oh, yes, no. All good books. So, don't complain about it in the comments. And while you're at it, like and comment on this video. It really helps us, especially if you're one of our returning fans. Please like it. It really helps. Again, we're doing terribly in the algorithm because we've been liking too many books lately instead of disliking them. And that's, more of the place I want to take the channel, but it's going to be tough. And also, we have a Patreon. We're not going to shill the whole thing because that's kind of long right now. But if you want to meet a lot of cool, sexy, smart people, we have a Discord and we have a book club. Okay, how does this book start, Maria?
So this book starts with our girl, Kenna, moving back to the town that Scotty grew up in, and specifically starts with one of the dumbest moves. If you're coming back into a town to win over the mother and father of the man you loved that you unfortunately were involved in the accident that killed him, and you didn't realize he was still alive and thus left him for dead. If you were going to do that, step one, how this book opens is what you should not do. She passes the spot of the accident. She's in a taxi driving into town. Okay. She's got nothing. She's got her backpack of stuff. She was out of prison. She lived in a group home situation, as a transitional house for, I think, a year. And she's finally footloose, fancy free. Okay. And she's in the cab going into this town, and she sees the spot where Scotty died. She sees one of those white crosses that people put up to memorialize the place where somebody they loved has died. And she knows that it was probably Grace, Scotty's mother, who put that there. But she decides, you know what? Stop the taxi. Because Scotty hated roadside memorials. He thought they were really dumb. And so, to honor the dead guy that everybody is mad that he's dead because of her, she removes the memorial.
And the thing about it is, this gives you an impression of Kenna that's not going to be borne out through the book, that you think she's a little bit irreverent and maybe a little punk rock.
And a little devil-may-care,
Yeah, and then that's not who she is throughout the entire book.
No, she is so painfully aware of other people's thoughts. She's so painfully aware of her situation, how other people are going to perceive her perception of her lack of self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
This is a ballsy ass move. You know, and the taxi driver's like, should you be doing that? And like the Kenna in the rest of the book immediately would have been like, oh my god, what if this guy goes back and talks to someone and like I get recognized? Like at no point, all he would have to say is, you know, that cross, and everybody would be like, yeah, that cross from that big, very public death that happened to one of our own that marked his grave. Who's going to tell Grace? And then all you need to do is for someone to find out you're back in town, and then everybody's just going to assume, correctly, you took it. Does this come back and become a problem that needs to be dealt with at any point? Is this a nice, this book is going to have conflict and we're setting one up now that will pay off later? No. It doesn't come up until the very end, and it has no impact on how she interacts with the rest of the people in town. It's just here to give a bad impression of what Kenna's personality is that is not actually her personality, because she doesn't do anything this ballsy or irreverent or, you know, like, it's not like she's like, I have my own beliefs, like, I'm my own person. I've had a long time to think about, like, the stuff that has happened, and I am not going to be apologetic. I'm here to get my daughter and like make a life for myself. That's not Kenna.
The other thing is that, and this will run in a lot, is that Kenna sometimes has very unhinged behavior, but it's never really, you never quite feel like it springs from, like, again, going back to it, and we'll talk about it more, but like Kenna actually emotionally is pretty well regulated and stable, and so when she does kind of crazy things, it just seems out of character instead of springing from some kind of like instability under the surface or grief or attachment trauma. And so again, this was Colleen Hoover going like, oh, this is a good way to start, because I needed to info dump a lot. This book has so much fucking info dump. Whoa. There's a whole one of the things that'll happen, and I think it starts here, is that Kenna writes diary or letters to Scotty, who is dead. And I think halfway through this, I messaged a friend who was also reading this, and I said, why does this dumb bitch keep telling Scotty things he already knows? Because that's the thing. Her letters are all about how they interacted from her viewpoint and reminding him of things that happened in their life. And that makes no sense. He knows this happened. Either should she be writing letters to him now about what's happening, or should she be writing these letters about the past to DM to show them to her when they get there? Or even like, I'm trying to remember this, so I'm going to do it like I'm speaking to Scotty, but it's so that we can tell our daughter. Like, It's a real weird lapse in judgment, and it just feels like info dumping.
She talks about their first date. He was there. She talks about, we get a rundown of the first time they met, and he did like a dumb quirky thing to like get her to notice him. And we get it written in painful detail again, and it's not that it makes so much more sense. God, you're so right to write it to DM and be like, I want you to know, I'm sure your grandparents tell you about your father, but I want you to know what I knew of him, because there's a lot of people that you probably know that knew him, but nobody who probably knew him the way I did. And this is his stories, and it should be letters from mom to daughter talking about Scotty as a person. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what Scotty looks like.
No idea. It also should be much more her. Like, it could be a really interesting tool for her to be like, look, I'm going to tell you everything, even when it's ugly to me, and we could get an idea for who she was then, and how she could lead up to a drunk driving accident. There's, I don't remember what it's called, but there's a movie I'm going to be referencing a few times that had, who's that actress, people? Anne Hathaway in it. And it's about her coming after, I don't know, rehab to her sister's wedding. And when she was young, she killed their brother through drunk driving. And it's a movie that's very emotional. It does this story much better. There's a lot of grief. She asks her parents, like, why did you let me drive him? Like, you knew I wasn't doing well. You get a sense for, like, this is a thing she is never going to be able to atone for, and she somehow has to live with it. And, like, there's a lot of complexity there. She's also, like, a little bit shitty, which is really funny to me. But, like, it's a very good movie, and this book doesn't do that. And so it could have been a really interesting tool for her to be like, look, I'm going to have to be honest about myself in a way that is very painful, but I'm going to do this for you, my daughter, type of a thing.
And everything that I think connecting to that and the idea of that character still being a little shitty actually works because people are nuanced. And I think one of the missed opportunities in this book is everything, all the negative ideas that they had of her from when she was younger were all false. They were all accidents of, instead of her just being like kind of thoughtless. And because the thing is, I don't think it's bad to have your 21-year-old self be someone that you're not super proud of later in life and to look back on and be like, I learned these lessons, I'm not that person anymore. But the thing that this book tries really hard to set up is that Kenna was good best girl from the start, and any negative opinions that they had of her were just misunderstandings or problems of fate. So I'll basically tell you now, because I think this is a really valid thing too, because I think this book would have been stronger if she had been a little bit of what they thought she was, and she had just grown past that, and also to say like, but your son was the same way. That's why we were together. Because
yes, I thought that's what's going to happen, is they were going to have to confront the fact that, yeah, their son was kind of using drugs, and this is sort of partly his fault. Not the victim, but like this is kind of partly he was involved, and they were going to reject her for offering that view of their son, and then they would have to grow to learn like, we have to accept a more rounded view of our son. He was a person, not just a memory, and there is a part of his life we can learn through her that's ugly, but is truthful. And also, I changed my mind about the diary thing. It should start with her very glowingly describing scenes of her and her father, and then as the book goes on, she's like, no, I need to revisit this and tell you I was high when we did this thing and I don't remember what the ring looks like, or something like that.
Yes, exactly, because the two of them, as most people, like younger people, they were doing the drinkings and that. And so back to the scenes with her and meeting the parents for the first time. One of the first issues is that she didn't have a good relationship with her parents. She doesn't know how to function in a kitchen, so she doesn't offer to help prepare the meal. She just kind of sticks to Scotty because he's her lodestone. Like she can't move past him because she's so anxious. And to potentially have it where her and Scotty were just so obsessed with each other because they're 21 and like 23 and in love. They were just so into each other, and he was like, here, look at these photos, or here, look at my this, and let me show you all this. And then she realizes in retrospect, I should have offered to help. I was so wrapped up in him that I didn't think about offering to help, and I should have. That's something, because at least if they would have said, no, go enjoy.
Pro move when you're dating, always take the family side against whoever you're dating. They'll appreciate it. They always, like, you always have to back them up in arguments. It's really weird.
And also, if they're teasing the person that you're dating, you jump. You gotta
get in there.
So my one mom, teasing is part of her love language. Love languages, like relentless, and my boyfriend shares that with her, and so when the two of them are together, it is just a let's make fun of Maria fest. It's great, but it immediately helped bond my mom to him, so good advice. Also, you should always offer to help. A lot of people's parents are going to say, no, don't worry about it, you're a guest, you go to, but at least do the offer. Like, make the offer, and, that way they can decide. Because I guarantee you, I can see Grace being like, oh, no, you go, have a good time. She would have appreciated it. But again, how it's framed is, just sad, anxious Bob.
Anxiety.
Can't do the thing. Instead of something that feels more like, because, like, if we're humans, we make mistakes. We go into situations, we screw it up, and we're like, oh my God, why did I do that? Like, why was Maria the dumbest girl in school? And
that's the other thing about Kenna that we'll come to realize, is she's a very passive character. This story really isn't her story. This is really Ledger's.
Ledger. The voice actor for Ledger talks like this.
Oh my God, his voice actor is so bad. I mean, part of the reason Kenna's character almost works in the audiobook is that her voice actress is actually quite good. There's a part where she's reading a diary entry, and you're just like, oh, this is almost just a dramatic exercise for her in building it. No, Ledger's voice actor he's good if this was a Tom Clancy novel.
Yes.
Like, he has such a masculine feeling to him that I'm just like, this is not working, guys.
Ledger. Like, it's
a very flat too and unemotional.
The next mishap that happens when she first meets them is they go out onto the patio. She doesn't smoke, But our homeboy Scotty does smoke, and he goes to pee around the side of the house because, you know, God forbid to come inside and do that in the house you live in, or that you were raised in.
That was so weird. Again, it would make so much more sense if they were like very high, like they were druggies almost.
He gives her the cigarette to hold, and then Grace comes out, sees it, brings a red Solo cup, and is like, "None of us smoke here. Please use this as an ashtray," and judges her for it. And it would have been made way more sense if she actually did smoke. Like, I'm okay with Scotty going off and they didn't realize Scotty smoked, but I think it again, that she did smoke, and her turning around at some point going, "Yeah, I smoked, but Scotty was the one that got me into smoking. I didn't smoke before him. I'd never gotten, like, high before him, and your son was still a good person with a great, like, a great future ahead of him, but he did these things, and I'm not the person that did that." But instead, Kenna is sweetest, best golden girl, and, you know, and they never deal with the fact, at no point does this book deal with the fact that Scotty was the one who actually smoked, that the night that Scotty died, they had been drinking, and they had gotten high, and they'd gotten higher than they expected. Scotty was more drunk and more high than Kenna, so he asked her to drive. She shouldn't have done it. But at no point do they, like, deal with the fact that, like, no, these were habits that we both had that absolutely we should have done it at a house, in a place where we were safe and, like, you know, where we didn't have to drive afterwards.
Or even that it made our behavior like a little shitty. So like maybe also like Scotty didn't want to admit to his mom that he was the one drinking or whatever. And the thing about it is, if you focus a little bit more on the substance abuse issues, that is such a great conflict for a parent, because that would force their parents to go, what did we do wrong that led him to that path? Even if they didn't actually do anything wrong, you as a parent are always like, why did he feel the need to do this thing? And like, you can never really have that answered, and that's really tragic. And like, it's weird the book doesn't take this very organic conflict that's meaty and is you know, at one point, you know, Ledger will say like, none of us are bad people, we're just all sad people who can't get along. And it's like, that actually is something where, like, okay, it is difficult to parse through an issue like drug abuse and where that comes from, and maybe confronting that your child, like, he was a good guy, but, like, he's not the saint you remember.
And to clarify, this book doesn't have drug abuse. At no point does Scotty, does Scotty or Kenna have actual drug, like, neither of them are alcoholics, they just had some beers, a few too many for what they were doing that night, and they had a joint and they got higher than expected. Like, the stuff was stronger than they thought it was going to be, is the vibe. So there isn't actually, but for a parent to realize my golden child's son actually smoked pot.
And also, they could just be old school like that, where they're just like, the ganja, the reefer.
Oh my god! He was a hippie? You know? And then being like, no!
That could have impacted how they're raising DM now, you know what I mean? Like, that's a very thorny issue. And
it also would have been great for, like, Kenna to turn around on Ledger and be like, he told me you two smoked weed together, and then for Scotty's parents to be like, Ledger, you two, and then them having to come to terms with that, and then everybody being like, you guys are crucifying me for something that Scotty was actively doing that night, and that Ledger did. Like, they just didn't end up in this, like, and yes, I never should have gotten behind the wheel, but my judgment was compromised. And, like, there's so many ways where the messiness and complexities of this, and the reevaluating, like, okay, we have to reevaluate our perfect ideal of our son, but also we have to reevaluate this terrible idea of her, and then find the midpoint of they're humans fuck up, and we can move on. Like, we can acknowledge, like, eventually they get to the point where they go, okay, maybe Scotty did smoke cigarettes and weed, and he did drink more than we thought he did, but he was still our lovely son, and he might not have been the golden boy we thought he was, but he was still a good guy with a great future. If we can believe that of him, then that has to apply.
Oh, that's so interesting, Maria. Or even understand that maybe he was the one that got her into drugs a little bit. And like, yeah, maybe that was a part of her that came from him. Because it does make sense that, like, maybe when she was young, she was just like, no drugs. I know this is a very bad idea. I have emotional instability. But she felt safe with him, or she wanted to please him. And that's what got her into it. Also, she should have been black, so that there was a little bit of unconscious, like, oh, she got him into this, you know what I mean? Like, that would have been like a nice little thing, but I mean, again, the author just does not want to make any of her characters flawed.
I'm so glad she didn't touch that, because I imagine she would have done a terrible job with that representation, so I'm very glad that didn't happen. Would that have been, like, a dealing with the people's preconceived notions?
Yes, in the hands of a better writer, that's an interesting thing, but, like, there's a Down syndrome character in this book, and she is, like, very stereotypically disabled mascot trope or whatever that is.
Continuing the plot, because we still haven't gone that far. She goes into the town. Jesus Christ. She goes into the town. She gets she gets a room, an efficiency apartment at, like, Paradise Apartments, and she ends up with a kitten. Let me tell you, this book is going to pretend that all kittens need is water and food, and that there's not litter boxes, or they don't need scratching posts. Like, the fact that couch... Also, anyone who has had a cat and a air mattress knows that you don't have a functioning air mattress if you have a cat, especially a kitten who's living in a space that is empty except for an air mattress and a couch. Cats scratch shit. You don't have an air mattress anymore. Anyway, we're gonna
No. Because what happens is that when she's trying to get this apartment and, you know, she has bad credit or whatever, the crazy cat lady who's taking over there's like, hey, you don't have to pay, I don't know,
electricity.
Yes, if you take a kitten of mine and a cat. And Ken's like, I don't want a cat. And she's like, but I gotta do it. And again, as Maria said, the cat will not be really a problem throughout this novel. It's actually just weird it exists. But how much better, Maria, let me ask you this, would it be as a metaphor if she had taken the kitten gladly because it was cute, and then she had figured out, oh, kittens are terrors, and that could have been a opportunity for growth to realize, like, oh, maybe children are difficult. Maybe you like the idea of them, but in actuality, it's a lot of work.
And you're not ready.
And also that even after all those things that happen, you still love them, and that's how they must feel about her daughter, instead of her just being like, oh, they raised her great. I know they did because they raised Scotty great. Like, there's so much informed greatness of the characters in this. That would have been a much better growth, I think, than being like, oh, the kitten is cute.
She gets the kitten. And then that night she's like, I'm gonna go hang out. And she wants to go to what used to be a little bookstore / cafe. Before she plans to the next day go see Grace and... I forgot what his name is.
Joe?
Maybe? We'll call him Joe. I don't think it's Joe.
But we're gonna call him Joe.
We're gonna call him Joe. It was Grace and... Joe. And she's gonna go see them the next day. Again, let me paint a picture for you. She had enough money to pay for first and last month of her apartment. She did not have enough money to pay for the $250 fee that you need to open an account with the electric company. That's why she ended up with a kitten. And she just has enough money for, like, a couple of groceries, which means she's basically penniless. She's just out of her group home. She doesn't yet have her anything really together. And she's like, I'm gonna go see them tomorrow.
It's so dumb. Again, there's parts of this book where, like, the author doesn't really understand what life is like after prison. And also just, like... Kenna is unhinged, but not in a way that feels unhinged, just in a way that feels sort of random. Because it's not like she, like, had this plan and then she just ended up there and was like, okay, I gotta do it. Like, you know what I mean? There wasn't I am a normal person, but my emotions are not allowing me to keep to that plan. She just is like, oh, I'll just show up. They probably won't like it, but...
And there's no, like, okay, before I show up, I need to show them that I'm responsible, I've got my stuff together, that I have, like, you know, if a DM ever comes and visits, I've got an appropriate place for her, I've got enough money to, like, you know, take her out. Because her plan isn't, I would like my child, give me my child back. Her plan is just, I would like to know my child, can I come visit her? But again, she has zero to her name, nothing to show that she's in a position to be even a visiting auntie. of a person.
No, it should have been something where like she was gonna stay in the town and build up and then go and confront them, but for some reason that ended up having to happen early. And so when she's like, "Oh no, I have this plan," nobody believes her because she like actually hadn't delivered on it yet.
Exactly. And or like so the actual thing I think to do is to build up your reputation, your savings, and a job skill set out somewhere else first, and then move to this town. Like if this was 3 years after she left prison, so they already knew she'd been out of prison for 3 years and hadn't shown up. She built up a career like I don't know, maybe she became a tattoo artist or like anything. She ended up like working in a restaurant, and now she's a pretty functional line cook or sous chef. Like she's at like also giving this girl a hobby or something else she was into would have greatly helped her character in any way. But so we have her. She decides she's gonna go. She needs to build up herself. She wants to go to the bookstore where her and Scotty used to go and hang out, but it's now turned into a bar called Ward's.
No idea.
Yeah, because Ledger's last name is Ward, so it's Ledger's spot. But anyway, and she goes into the bar, and she's like sitting at a table, and she asks for a water and a Coca-Cola, and she's writing in the journal, and Ledger immediately is like, "Oh my god, who be she?" Like, and he can't stop looking at her, and she's just so goddamn beautiful, and he's just immediately like the entire night. Also, his parents show up, and there's like his parents have an RV, and they show up at random weird times, and they were playing one song basically for 4 hours.
It's supposed to be funny and kooky, and you're like, nah, you can't really write banter, Colleen Hoover.
No. And eventually, like, he goes up to take her order, and it's a Coke and a water, and he's like, "What is she writing? I'd like to see what she's writing." And she, like, looks up at him finally, and she's like, "Oh my god." Double take. He's so gorgeous. His tattoos, his prowess. And because, like, prior to this point, she's like, "I kissed a guard in the prison, but I didn't feel anything, but it was nice to be wanted. Perhaps I'll never feel anything again for another man, Scotty, besides you. You were the last man that touched me intimately, outside of that one kiss with that one prison guard." And, and then immediately looks up and sees Ledger, and is like, "Hot damn, is that a fire in my loins?" Like, and so the two of them are just the entire, like,
it's very teenage. It's so teenage the way it's written, of like they just find each other hot, and like again, this is going to lead you to think that they're both kind of like hookup people in terms of, because this is their first time meeting. Apparently, he kind of hooks up with people. I think it's like, or somebody thinks he hooks up with people, and you're like, okay, this is the kind of character. And again, this is right after she stole a sign, so you're like, okay, she's a little bit of a mess, maybe she's like a little out there, adventurous, and this is again not borne out by the rest of the novel. It's just out of character. It's
not just that these are two people that when they find someone physically attractive are gonna explore that. It's two people who don't do that and actually are quite traditional in their romantic values, but they're so into each other and taken with each other that they're going to... I hate this as a trope, and I know some people love it. They don't care about characters falling for each other. They just want them to like each other, and then now we have to deal with the fallout of that. But I hate it as a trope. It's so antithetical to everything I want.
I think it makes for bad writing. It makes for bad writing. I'm gonna say it.
It's so bad. Anyway, so the two of them, and then like she orders a glass of white wine. And at this point, she's told you, the reader, via Scotty, that she doesn't actually have a drinking problem. She never did. She just had more beers than she should have had that night. And she orders a white wine, and we're in Ledger's point of view when she orders the white wine, and she just looks at it. She looks at it, and we know that one of Ledger's employees was a former alcoholic, or is an alcoholic, I should say, and is about to hit 100 weeks sober.
And there's this kooky thing where Ledger gives him a different cup eat a different mug each Friday, and you're like, that's a weird thing for you to do, and they're like, that's a weird thing for him to do, but isn't it funny?
That guy now has 100, almost 100 coffee mugs just knocking about. I get upset if I have like 20 in my cabinet because who has ever, this guy, and eventually we get to go into the apartment and there's just a line of coffee mugs saying like, congratulations, you're the best dad, like random shit like that. Anyway, but it sets up, because that's what happens with Ledger when we first see him. He comes in, he's opening up the bar, he's talking to Roman, which is the guy that he's given this thing to, and so you get the idea that like he's been helping Roman. He's a nice, good, heckin' good boy guy, but who's kind of burly. He's a former NFL player for the Broncos, and now he owns this bar, and you know, he's building his dream house somewhere else, but he's currently living in his parents' house that he bought from them. And so, like, this guy's got everything. Like, his life is just all together. And, yeah, he sees the sad girl, and he was like, is she the saddest girl I've ever met? And immediately you're just like, for me, I'm like, I'm sure other people are, like, a lot of people who like the hurt comfort, and they want the nice, like, big burly guy to take care of the sad small girl who needs who's got the trauma, and they like the, like, I will
I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it.
It's not my favorite trope. It's not my favorite trope. No offense to P, I don't think that trope, generally, like Will said, he enjoys it. And I know Katie enjoys it. I don't think that trope is a bad one. It's just not one for me. And immediately...
Well, he's also not, like, grumpy enough. Like, he should be more grumpy.
He should be so grumpy.
He's, like, just very... again, there's this weird thing where everybody in the book kind of loses. So here's kind of what I think happened. I think Colleen Hoover kind of started with a different view of these characters, and again, this is a little bit mean to say, but I'm the little bit mean one on this podcast. Somebody has to be truthful. I think she isn't emotionally comfortable enough to write characters that are flawed consistently. So over time, she just naturally kind of sands off their more ugly characteristics so that she feels more comfortable in these characters that she likes. This happens with authors. Sometimes they are not comfortable writing these characters, and so naturally the characters kind of homogenize over time into good boys and girls.
So, for instance, Rhysand from Katara is a perfect example. Book 1, you think Rhysand is like, and because, like, listen, if Rhysand was going to end up being a compelling love interest that was like a nuanced, flawed character who through getting to know Feyre was going to develop and get past some of those issues and, like, yeah, had done some fuck. No. The book rewrites everything. He was never a fucked up, flawed boy. He was always heckin' good asbestos boy. You just didn't know and didn't have the context to understand the perfection that was Rhysand. And this book falls into that trap where, and again, it sets up two characters where you're like, oh, maybe these are two characters that get down with the one night nookie on occasion, and will not engage. Maybe Kenna's like, I can't get involved with another man. As much as I enjoy sex, I'm not ready to have an emotional connection with someone, so one night stands is it for me. And maybe Ledger's like, I'm a year out of my broken engagement. I'm also just not on a point. And then these two, like, they can no. These are two heckin' good monogamous lovey babies, and that just heartbroken, too busy. We're like, there's any initial setup.
True.
And same with her being an irreverent, ballsy person that set up by her removing a literal memorial. Could you imagine? The fucking balls to see the memorial cross for the man you loved that died as a result of an accident you were in, that you also unintentionally and unknowingly left to die in that spot, seeing it and going, his grieving mother left that there to honor him, and because he didn't like it when he was alive, I'm going to honor his dead person memory.
It's so stupid.
Over the living grief of his mother.
Whose goodwill I need. It's so stupid.
It's anyway, but that would have been really cool if she was like, fuck it, I'm just here. Like, again, if she was ballsy and irreverent.
As an unhinged character moment, I like it. It's just that that's not borne out by the rest of the novel.
She's going to try to be hecking good girl. God, we're still in the first scene. Oh yeah, she gets the glass of wine and she's like looking at it, and for some reason, even though she doesn't have a compulsive problem, like she's not a compulsive drinker, she doesn't have any other compulsive habits, to make herself feel strong, she'll order alcohol and then not drink it to show that she can control herself, even though none of what happened had to do with control. They were all, at no point was she was like, oh, I shouldn't drink. In fact, what should be the thing she does is whenever she does drink, she just never leaves the house.
Or she's afraid to, no, exactly.
Like, that's an actual outcome of it, because again, she's not painted as having a drinking problem or a drug problem when she was younger. It just was a bad, shitty night gone wrong. And again, the decision that should have not been made, because I'm not going to sit here and say that Scotty and her shouldn't have drank.
I am. This is a Christian podcast.
Get the fuck out.
Christian podcast. Just kidding. Go ahead.
The thing that shouldn't have happened was her getting in the car. So why ordering a glass of wine and choosing not to drink it is this powerful thing for her is insane. That has nothing to do with she doesn't have a compulsive habit problem anywhere. Mm-hmm. So having to fight a compulsive nature is not something she's actually dealing with. It was a mistake of being under the influence. In fact, if I was her, I was like, I'm never drinking. Like, I'm not even looking at alcohol. Like, even though that wasn't the actual problem, I just can't trust alcoholic me to make good decisions.
Yeah, no, completely. And also, she hasn't had it for 5 years in prison. So it's like, okay, that's fine. Now, there's so many parts of this that are stupid. Anyway, her and Ledger, like, have a meet cute. It's not that cute. Then they start, like, humping each other in the car. And then he's like, oh, what's your name? And well, no, she's like, what's your name? And he says Ledger. And she's like, oh, my God. I never met him, but Scotty's best friend was called Ledger. Oh, I'm going to continue to hump him in the car, even though I shouldn't.
Yeah. So because they kiss, he tells her to come back to the bar. She goes to leave. He tells her to come back. And she is like, I'm going to do it because he took away my wine glass and which denied me my ability to say no to something. So I'm going to go back to the bar and say no to him. And that'll, because again, she has this thing where she needs to say no to stuff to make her feel strong, even though saying no to men and alcohol, like men and having a drink was not the actual problem. But anyway.
Also, not a thing she'll do later in the novel whatsoever. It's never. Just this scene.
And so she's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to say no to him. And then, like, they kiss at the bar and he says his name is Ledger. And she's like, oh no. And with those words, he broke whatever little remained of my heart. And then you find out that he's Scotty's best friend, Ledger. And she immediately, like, fucks off. Like, she runs outside and she's crying. And he just holds her because he's like, sad baby girl, I don't know what is wrong, let me hold you. And she was like, it's the first time I was held like this since Scotty died. And you're sitting there going, oh no, you need to tell him right now. You just need to say, hi, my name is Kenna, and I didn't know, but I'm the Kenna that was with Scotty, and I didn't know you were Ledger. I am so sorry, I need to leave. In which case, whatever. But she doesn't. And he's like, let me drive you home. You're obviously not in a good state of mind. Let me drive you home. And she's like, no, I don't live far away. And he's like, where do you live? And it's far. But anyway, so he's like, we'll go to my truck. And then they go to the truck. And it is the truck that Scotty picked her up on their first date because his car was in the shop. So he used his best friend Ledger's orange truck. She then gets into this truck. Her and Ledger do the mackin' and the making outing, and then we're gonna have the sexes in this car-ing, and then a cop pulls by that happens to be friends with Ledger, which stops everything, and they end up going and just dropping her off at the apartment, and he's like, God damn, I have to see her again. And she's like, oh my God, I must never see him again.
I wonder how this will work out.
The next morning, she goes to a grocery store. She's been applying for jobs, but unfortunately she has a record. And the other problem is, I don't know, because she makes a really big deal of not letting people know her name. but when you fill out job applications, you have to put your full name. And you have to, and she puts that she was in prison, which means anyone who is like, that name's kind of familiar, and she says she was in prison, could look her up and see what happened, and then her whole thing would just be blown wide open of her secrecy. It's not what happens. Nobody does that. At no point, none of her job applications come back to bite her in the ass.
She just puts Nicole in quotation marks to tell people to call her Nicole.
Nicole. But she still puts her whole name, and that she was in prison. No one will hire her once they find out she's in prison, which is a thing that happens. She also makes the dumbest comment. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is how Colleen Hoover don't know shit. She says there is a double standard for women who were in prison and men who were in prison. Where men who were in prison, on top of having the oh my god, what do? They get social currency of being a cool badass that women in prison don't get. So women in prison get all the negative association, but don't get badass association.
It's so stupid.
I have never heard that in my life.
It's so stupid. It's like she has no idea what's going on with our prison industrial complex whatsoever.
I am fucking flummoxed. I am shocked. I am absolutely... when I heard that, I literally paused the audiobook and went, excuse the fuck out of me, since when? And listen, I'm not saying that either sex... I think both have it really hard, but I don't think men have the added benefit of coming out of prison, applying for jobs, and people going, well, he might have been in prison, but he's probably a badass because of...
Okay, it's so stupid because that's not a thing that happens. Re-socialization into society is extremely difficult for people. We treat them horribly. There's a reason recidivism rates are so high, and it's society's fault. And the thing is that she is theoretically the person who comes out of prison with the highest level of privilege. She doesn't have any psychological issues. She isn't feeling PTSD. One of the big problems people in prison have is they get used to prison life and then you yank them out and it's difficult. Also, she's a pretty white lady who doesn't have tattoos.
And who has no addiction problems.
She has so much, literally the person at the counter would probably be like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're not the kind of person I think of when I think of a woman freshly out of prison. It is fucking bizarre to me that Colleen Hoover wrote that and thought, and that editors read it and went, we'll let it stand. We'll let it stand. I'll allow it. No. Anyway,
so
she ends up in the bathroom at the job. She's at a grocery store and she realizes that she kind of smells and she's sweaty and she doesn't look good. So she's in the bathroom trying to freshen herself up. And then one of the ladies who works there comes in and they end up chatting and kind of befriending each other. And she's like, actually, I was coming here to apply for a job. And the lady is, well, actually, I'm one of the manager people here. I'll give you an application. And she's like, I should let you know, I'm recently out of prison. And the lady's like, I don't give a shit. You just gotta... would you like to bag some groceries? It's very cheap. It's minimum wage. And Kenna's like, absolutely. And she's like, it's part-time. And she's like, I'll take it. So, day one, she gets a job.
Again, there's Colleen Hoover didn't even do any research. Again, this is what I'm saying, where it's like there isn't a big issue in this book like It Ends With Us, which is abuse apologia. There's just a lot of small either mediocrities or blind spots in her social views that lead to problematic things of this is just not how getting out of prison and trying to get a job works. It just isn't. I can't get a job that easily. Are you kidding me? It's insane that she just walks up and gets a job in this small town.
There are, jobs where people have an easier time getting, a position, such as in the food industry. A lot of people in the food industry, and frankly, I think it's great. And oftentimes they can work up and get really good positions. but it's also rough. Like anyone who's worked in the food industry, it is rough fucking work. I dated a chef for a while who's had been like
he had a pizza stone oven.
Yeah, he had been a chef de cuisine before, and then was like, fuck it, I just want to be a line cook. And even that was like, it's fucking rough, you know? And like just all the elements of it, of working in that industry, is a hard time. But no, she walks into a family grocery store and immediately just gets a job day one. She got a couple of rejections, but day one gets job. And as she's filling out the application, who walks in?
Oh.
But Ledger. Now, I have to cut back to what is happening to him on this day, because this book goes back and forth. He is taking DM to her t-ball game. He's one of the coaches for her t-ball team. And so he picks up DM, and he has to pick up the Gatorade for the team. So he's going to this grocery store to buy a butt ton of Gatorade. DM is in the car. And she's sitting there because she realizes this is Ledger. He probably has a relationship with my daughter. And then when he sees, because she asks, like, that's a lot of Gatorade. And he's like, oh, yeah, Coach T-Ball. And she's like, oh, my God, I wonder if my daughter is on his team. He's trying to talk to her and flirt. And she's trying to fill out this application. And she sees the lady who hired her looking over. And she's like, I can't let this manager think that I'm into this guy. That I'm immediately, before even fully finishing the application, I'm gonna be a problem. So she's like, fuck off, Ledger. And then when he leaves, she's like, what if DM was in the car right then? So she tries to go out and see him once she's filled out the application, and he's gone. He's not there. No chance to see her daughter.
We need to talk about him and DM for a minute. So again, this is where this book has a weird amount of, like, I don't want to say gender essentialism, but kind of gender essentialism, which is that it doesn't seem to understand that what a lot of the characters are doing is kind of weird. It's kind of weird that he took DM on as essentially his child. Like, what was his connection to Scotty like that he... Why... Again, this isn't a normal person thing to do, because we find out later he broke up with his fiance, because his fiance was like, DM's not your kid, you know, and he's like, nah. You whore. And so, like, it doesn't really make sense that he would just do this. So, like, okay, but the thing is, you could also explain it. Like, maybe him and Scotty were gay for each other, and so he, like, loved Scotty. Maybe he has always felt like he wanted a child. Maybe his, I don't know, he had no, he didn't have a miscarriage, but somebody else had a miscarriage, and he really wanted to be a father.
Maybe he had been the person to get Scotty drinking more.
Exactly.
And into marijuana. And there was a part of him that thinks, maybe if I hadn't done that, then they wouldn't have ever been in that position. Because, like, I don't know, if they did a toxicology report, it would have shown that he'd been smoking Zaganj plus, you know, alcohol. And maybe Ledger blames himself and feels guilty as much as he does blame. And that would also tee him up to be more sympathetic to Kenna. While also hating her at the same time, because he also hates himself and how his influence maybe he was the person that got Scotty into those things. And when he went into the NFL, because of how rigorous it was, he actually stopped a lot of that stuff, but Scotty continued it. And so he blames a part of himself, and he's like, I have to help. But, like, my debt to Scotty is going to be to make sure his daughter has the best fucking life possible.
No, completely. And so, and another place this shows up, and I actually think this could be a really interesting commentary on gender roles and the way society shapes us, which is that this could be a more interesting story if it was about Kenna. Because, okay, here's the thing with Kenna. She is DM's mother, but the only parts of mothership she has, and the book never acknowledges this, is she got pregnant and had her birth. Those are the only actual parts of parenting that Kenna has done. But she's always thinking of DM as her child, and she's always thinking about the ways she loves DM, and that actually just doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't. She's not the only... There's kind of an interesting idea that she views herself as a mother, maybe because this is the only identity she has to hang on to, because she doesn't have family, she was in prison for this long, and, you know, societally women are pressured so much to have children and be mothers that this is an identity she has decided, okay, this is how I'm going to define myself. And then she has to deal with the fact that, like, No, I'm not actually a mother. I never, because she hasn't done any motherly things in the way that, like, a stepmother is a mother despite not having given birth or carried the child. Like, so there's that kind of biological versus societal split there that I think would have been really interesting to explore. But the book doesn't do that, because the book is just like, well, women, mothers, yeah.
If you have a baby, you're just automatic, like, there's no postpartum depression that complicates your feelings of, like, having a child. Like, it very much essentializes the idea of motherhood. And as someone who has a mother who is not at all biologically related to me, the parenthood is so much more than just the birthing. And I know mothers who birth babies and are not really mothers, you know? Like, they just, they exist in a biological space, but not in the social position of motherhood.
And that could have been great for what the kitten does. The kitten shows her, oh, this is actually what being a mother in a social sense means.
They never talk about litter boxes. He never walks into the apartment and goes, wow, it smells like cat pee in here. And she's like, oh my God, I forgot to do the litter box. Like, this is something that you have to... Like, the kitten could have been such a fantastic tool of her realizing, I am not at all prepared for this thing, but I'd like to be... Also, I'd like to point out that Ledger is 28. What's her face is...
25, I think?
26. She's 26. All of this stuff. She was 21 when it happened. But DM is 4 years old, which means him as a 24-year-old, you know, out of the NFL, deciding to open a bar and do all of this stuff, which is super, like, that you have very little time. Like, if you're going to open a bar, run a bar, and also be building another house somewhere else, which is what he's doing, you don't have, like, a ton of time. And at 24, you're telling me, because, like, listen, if this guy was, like, 33, yeah, okay, I can see that guy being like, I'm ready for fatherhood. But, like, a 24-year-old, and it's not to say that doesn't happen. Plenty of people have children at 24, you know, but deciding to become the father figure for, and to the point that when the woman you're with goes, you know, I'd like you to prioritize children we have over DM. DM has parents that are going to take care of her. I'd like to make sure that, and he goes, no, fuck you, I'm not marrying you anymore. And because that's not what she says, but that's basically what she's asking. She's asking, are you going to prioritize children we have over DM? Because that's a concern she has, that she doesn't, and which isn't to say that, like, if you end up with someone that has that kind of a relationship with another child, like, sorry, ma'am, if you can't see that, like, this ain't for you. But I also think it is a valid question to ask, and I also think somebody breaking up over something like that is a valid thing to do. Those are the kinds of questions you gotta ask.
And, okay, so this is my second pitch for how this book should go, which is that he, after he got out of the NFL, had a drinking problem. This is a thing that's very common. It's very common for sports ball people to lose their money and have problems after they go from this very highly regimented environment of being beloved to just not really knowing how to do it. Anyway, so he should have had a substance abuse problem. And Scotty's parents should have helped him through it. And he should be on the other side of it now. And this is one of the reasons he loves DM so much, is that he was always okay with her or something like that.
Yeah.
And I would have loved if he then, and this is just from his point of view, kind of doesn't get one, that he is, through her and looking at her, he doesn't quite know if she is going to be good for DM or not, if she is stable or not, if this is a good thing to do or not. And it was a way of externalizing his internal conflict of, oh, the bad things I did while I was a druggie. Like, it's that thing where we like to give people grace because we're worried that, you know, we ourselves, we want to be given grace for the things we've done. And he could have, and that's like a very good external conflict of, like, okay, I'm letting my own feelings change how I view this situation, and I actually need to think about what's right and wrong, and like put myself and my ego outside of it.
Excellent. Excellent. That is a fantastic conflict for him to have. No, instead his conflict is he's into her, and that's why he's sympathetic. And also, she's actually perfect, most best girl. So, you know, he ends up being right about it. So, frankly, no conflict. Zero conflict. conflict. It was the conflict was a lie.
So what happens next is that we're going to probably skip over a good part of this novel because it's very boring. Basically speaking, she goes to their house and is like, she shows up with like a teething ring, which I did think was a little funny, and she's just going to knock on their door. And if you think that's really dumb, it is.
Yeah.
It's real dumb. And he sees her there and is like, oh, I know who you are now, bitch. Come to my house. Let's have sex. I'm just kidding, but that would have been a hot scene. And so, like, and then, he's like, get out of here. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. And, she leaves. And then later, Roman, by the way, we're also told that, we are told by Kenna that Ledger's a good person because he hires diversely at his bar. Because some of the people are black.
And women.
And yeah, it's like, okay, sure.
Wow, a paragon of inclusive industry.
And like, there's 3 people there, so it's not even like he's running a large corporation and trying to be diverse. It's like, no, he probably found like the 3 people he could find, guys. And Roman's like, I thought you were a better person than this. You were so much nicer to me when I was going through recovery. And he's like, oh, damn it, you're right. I should go check up on her to make sure she didn't. And like, and like, okay, that kind of makes sense actually, in terms of like, okay, yeah, maybe you did go a little hard. You do have to think she's a person, but even then, he's like a little bit easy on like the end point is okay, but the way Colleen Hoover writes to get it there is a little weak, and it still feels a little like, oh, I want them to have the hots for each other.
And that's the big problem is even when he finds out, like, realizes that she's Kenna, and also assumes that she knew the whole time that she came to the bar to take advantage of him, he's still kind of enchanted. And it just carries through everything. And it's also the kind of thing where I would have preferred if he had kind of come to that realization, like, after he cools down after a night of work, going, oh my god, I just denied someone their opportunity to potentially see their... And listen, it was a terrible idea. And she also, like, starts kicking. She runs back to the house and tries, like, like,
yeah, she's kind of unhinged.
Oh, man, why would you think this was gonna work well? Like, first off, I would never have just shown up. I would have been like, hi. I sent a letter. This is where I am. Here's some, like, here's some photos of my apartment, my life. Like, again, if you're doing this in a way that makes sense, you make sure everything is in order, and everything looks good.
No, it would have made so much more sense if he had brought her back to his house. They had done the nookie, and then in the next morning, this is a Christian podcast, she looked across and was like, oh my god, my child was there, and she had found herself in front of their door somehow, already almost knocking on it, and she's not even really
dressed. And it wasn't planned, and it was just... You know,
like an impulse.
That makes way more sense. And then he realizes, oh shit, you're like...
The crazy bitch.
Yeah, like, anyway.
And so she meets him, and they like... This is the part, too, where, like, they kind of snark at each other. And it's like, there's so much genuine emotion in terms of how they should be interacting, and genuine annoyance, that turning this into a bit of a, like... snark is doing a disservice to the characters, and it makes it something cheap that doesn't need to be cheap.
It makes it feels like shitty romantasy enemies to lovers.
Yes.
Rather than actual 2 people who are in a position to have negative feelings towards each other and then have to win each other over somehow.
Completely. It's bizarre. It's like putting cheap lace on a wedding dress that otherwise is made out of very nice silk. I'm trying to expand our female audience, guys. So metaphors.
I don't think you need to do that. It's already silly... like 70%.
And this is where we meet Lady Anne, who is Colleen Hoover's attempt at writing a Down syndrome character.
Lady Diana.
I'm a little of mixed mind, because on the one hand, I think it's funny that the voice actress was not brave enough to do a Down syndrome voice, but on the other hand, God, that would not have turned out well. So instead, she just has manic pixie girl voice, and she like walks into Kenna's apartment and is like, "Oh, what do you have this? Why do you have that?" She has one funny joke later in the book.
She's a 17-year-old. It's a very infantilized image of what a 17-year-old with Down syndrome is gonna be like, what they're like, and there's a point later where, like, I don't know, I don't love this character. You could have removed this character and nothing in this story would have changed. And it's not like it's good reps, so you're like, oh, having it there adds something. It don't. It adds nothing.
No, it's not even a metaphor for how difficult being a parent could be. She could see that the struggles that Lady Anne's mother has gone through, and that could have made her realize more, again, what actually being a mother is like.
Instead, what it functions as is Lady Diana, her name's not actually Lady Diana, but that's what she tells
that's what the book calls her.
Yeah, that's what she asks Kenna to call her, so that's what Kenna calls her. Lady Diana wants to go set off some sparklers, and so Ledger, listening to Roman, goes to check up on Kenna, only to find her out in front of the building setting off sparklers and having a good time, but he stays there long enough to see that every time Lady Diana goes away, Kenna's face drops and she puts her head in her hand and she looks like she's about to cry. But then when Lady Diana comes back, she's like, and he realizes, oh, because he judged her at first, like, here I thought she'd be a broken up mess and I was worried if she'd do something, and there she was having a great time. And then he realizes, oh no, she's putting this on for this girl. She's hiding her grief for this girl. And he's like, wow, that's actually kind of admirable. And then he sees her, or she sees him, and comes up and is like, fuck you, Ledger. And
you're what's wrong with society.
Lady Diana's like, hi, jerk. Why'd you kidnap her child? Because that's what she told Lady Diana that Ledger did.
Again, not a thing a real person would do. It's just kind of odd.
From this point, they're eventually going to hang out enough that he begins to see, oh, wow, she's not the terrible person I thought she was. And actually, she has a lot of grief. And, and also that she really loves her daughter. And there's a point where she's working at the grocery store, and he comes to get something, and Grace is there with Diem in the car. And they come out, and they see him, and he's like, oh, no, you need to get back in the car. Kenna works here, and as this happens, they're putting her in the car seat because he's like, you get her in the car, and Kenna comes out because she's walking someone with their bags to their car. Kenna sees Grace. Diem's already in the car, so she can't see Diem, but she sees the car seat, and she's like, oh my god. So she starts running, and she's walking towards him, and she's like, Grace, and Grace is like, gets in the car and runs off. Kenna starts running after, and just falls down, sobbing, crying, and he realizes, because at one hand he's like, okay, I did what was best for Grace in this moment, but he's also like, I also just really hard time denied Kenna the opportunity to see her daughter, and so he feels bad, so he's like, I'll tell your boss, Amy, that you are leaving work, and we'll go do I'll take you back to your house, or I don't know. And
whatever.
They do that, and basically the end result of this is he ends up offering. He basically says, I don't think there's any benefit to you getting into Diem's life. She has everything she needs. This is really for you. It's not for Diem. That's why you're here. You're here for yourself. And I don't think you're going to bring anything that she doesn't have. And I think the best thing is for you to get out of town. And she's like, I can't afford that. And he's like, I can't just offer her money. That would be insulting. And he's like, okay, I'll give you a job. You can work at my bar in the evenings after your shift's at What's-Its-Face. Here's the pay, but you have to stay in the back, and you cannot come out to the bar because nobody can know who you are.
You know what a better excuse for him giving her a job than just money is that actually it's not just about money. Her parole officer says she has to have a job, like...
She has to be working 40 hours a week?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a thing that parole officers do, because parole officers are just, like, half of them are okay, and then half of them are terrible.
There's no parole officer. It doesn't
exist. That's actually a very good excuse to force proximity. Like, romances often have the problem that they can't force proximity, and that's actually a good one of no, the state is saying you have to do this.
Or how fantastic to realize, as someone who employs people from not great backgrounds, to realize if I give her good work experience in a successful bar and can give her a good recommendation, wherever she moves, she can probably get a position in a bar, food industry, and be able to get back on her feet. It can be a good thing. That's also a great excuse, and also is a really valid one.
Again, Colleen Hoover has, white lady understanding of how prison and reintegration to society works. And not all white ladies, blah, 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 blah.
They end up doing that. She's actually a really good worker, and she's really good at organizing, and everybody at first is like, why did we hire another person? We didn't need them. But then very quickly after one day, it's like, wow, I actually, I really like this, and I don't even know why we didn't have someone else. We're going to be sad when she leaves, because he's like, this is temporary until she has enough money to get out of here.
So stupid.
The two of them continue, like, hanging out. Like, they just keep hanging out and, like, skirting their interest in each other. Eventually, it comes to a head. There's snow cones.
This is where you would think that there would be all the conflict in the book, and there isn't. There's just a lot of him going. And the other thing is, he keeps having the frame that Scotty's parents, like, they can't emotionally handle having her in their lives. And it's like, that's not the main like, it's weird that you have scapegoated that as the conflict for why she shouldn't be in Diem's life versus other more legitimate legitimate conflicts, like, we don't really know you, and we don't know if you're going to stay around that long. We don't know if you're a good influence on Diem, or parents. Like, parents take that shit very seriously. Like, there's a lot of conflicts there that the book is just kind of flattens to, okay, well, the only reason they're not letting her into her life is because they emotionally can't handle it.
That she would be a reminder of their grief, and they blame her, and they think of her as this terrible person. And you're right, there are so many other issues, such as, like, what if she eventually goes, you know what, you guys are doing a good job, I'm actually going to move somewhere else. They don't know that she isn't going to do that.
Or even, I'm going to go to the court and I want my child now. You know what I mean? Like, that is a thing that could happen.
And also feeding the child to be like, I want to be with my mother. Like, even though, like, the better situation is absolutely staying with the grandparents, given where she is in her life.
She could be a crazy stalker. We don't know. Like, you really don't know.
Ledger just takes everything at face value, and there's no real difficulty. Like, Kenna, once she gets to this town, has no real difficulty. Things just work out really well. She gets an apartment that she doesn't have to pay the electricity for, so she's able to afford it. She gets a job, day one of looking for a job. She immediately is put in proximity with someone who has access to her daughter, to the point where once, like, after the shopping, the grocery store parking lot fiasco, he shows her videos of Diem, because she's never seen what Diem looks like, and so he just shows her a bunch of videos to help her calm down, and she just spends like 2 hours in his car just looking through videos of Diem.
Insane. That is such a violation of Scotty's parents' privacy and trust.
Holy shit, is that... I read that and was like, oh my god. Oh, like, regardless if them getting parental rights, because the reason they got parental rights was not because they were like, we want to take it away. It was because she was supposed to be in prison for so long that there was no benefit to her having parental rights, and they wanted it, And, like, it happened. They are her legal parents. And for him to just do this...
You have to understand, I have 2 nephews. They are the cutest children in the world. Back me up, Maria.
Absolutely fucking adorable. They are.
My aunt has had many children.
Their smiles are cherubic.
Every picture of them looks like an advert. Their personalities are great. They say the funniest things. My sister sends my mom the funniest videos of them. I do not share those videos or pictures with anyone other than Maria and Katie, because a parent, you cannot be sharing pictures of children without the parents' consent. And even then, like, family vlog channels have proven parents don't even know what's best all the time. But, like, it is it is a serious thing. I could see why if you don't have children, you might not understand, but, like, this is not a funny haha.
I also follow Will's sister. We follow each other on Instagram, so I already had access to photos, so I have seen it. I was also at their wedding, so, Yeah,
no. She showed up. She was my date. My platonic date, but I was like, I need something.
I even made the wedding video.
Yeah, you have a funny walk at one point.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's the one.
No, I was like, I need some like weapons grade arm candy. Maria, are you up? And she's like, I got a dress.
Listen, I showed up. I looked great.
Well, the other thing is, she's Greek, so she's also helpful to have around for prep.
Yeah.
You're also gonna kind of work though.
Yes, I did. It was a good time. But anyway. That is exactly it. You don't just... And the fact that they have said that they don't want this woman at all involved, and he chose to do this, is wild. I get feeling sympathetic. I get feeling, like, sad in that moment as she sobs in your car because you denied her the moment to, like... But, like, if you want to help her, why don't you help her get to, by helping her get to a position where when she finally has a conversation with them... Or go to them and say, hey, if you say no, it's absolutely fine, but I have been talking to her. She's actually, she's proven to be a good worker, blah, 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 and she just wants to talk to you.
Ledger just doesn't handle this like an adult. He just doesn't. He and again, so much of the book is just him waiting around, because the thing is, the DM and the parents aren't even around. They're on like vacation or something for the weekend, or
on this one weekend towards the end of the book. Yeah. If for Mother's Day they go visit Joe's. His name isn't Joe, but Joe's mother.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so they're not even really around. And again, this is the part of the book where I expected a lot of angst and conflict, even if it was melodramatic. But there's just nothing. There's just flat, like, it reminds me of how Sarah J. Maas loves writing people just hanging out, snarking, and going through training montages. Like, that is her favorite thing to write. Colleen Hoover's favorite thing to write is just in this, like, oh, nothing's happening.
Honestly, she should write just rom-coms. Like, she have much, because so much of what happens between them, it just feels like standard rom-com procedure, but with these trappings of all the other stuff.
You're totally right. The problem, and I said this is to someone else, is that the problem is that this book is dealing with a lot of inherently weighty, juicy themes, and a rom-com is not the best way to tell, is not the best vessel to express this story and explore it. And so it just feels weird when they go for snow cones, and it's like the thing, and she has a punch card, and like, you're like, that's not, what's going on here? You murdered a man. Like, like, can we get back to that?
It's crazy. And there's a scene where they decide, no, this isn't it. So they go to, he wants to show her his house that he has built, and they go to like do stuff in it. Like, he shows it to her at one point, and then there's another point when they're going there on Mother's Day because she's going to be spending it. They end up sleeping together prior to this. Like, it finally hip hop happens.
The sex scene wasn't good, but it also wasn't painfully bad.
No,
I found, because there's not actually a lot of description, and also he didn't fucking talk, which is so nice, because everyone in these books, in romantic books, has the same slightly demeaning way of talking to the female protagonist, and I'm just like, not about it. I want it to be very demeaning. I'm just kidding.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, you're right. It's very tame in the sense that nothing is super graphic. But again, the fact that two people can sleep on a full-size air mattress and it doesn't end up on the floor, and she has a kitten, fucking insane. These are the things I think about. But they end up, he goes to see DM as they're getting ready to leave for Mother's Day. He wishes his mother happy Mother's Day. And he realizes he totally forgot when he left Kenna in the morning that it was Mother's Day, and he didn't wish her Mother's Day. And there's a part where DM's like, where's my mother? Is someone going to wish her? And he's like, I'll make sure your mother gets flowers. And everybody around is just like, yeah, that's cool. We're not going to think too hard about that statement. And like, nobody asks about it. And he's like, I guess they just assumed I was just saying something to placate the child.
One actually kind of funny part about this book is that at the beginning, DM had asked Scotty's mother, Grace. She had been like, why doesn't my mom take me to pickleball or whatever she's playing? And her mom is like, her car isn't big enough. And later she to Ledger, she's like, I just panicked. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like, that is actually genuinely pretty funny.
Yeah, it's one of the best, and feels like one of the most genuine moments to just be panicking when a child asks you something you're not prepared to answer, and just being like, her car isn't big enough for all of us, so she has to get a better car. We have a nice car, so you live with us. Like, it's just, and the kid's like, Ledger finds out about it, because DM's like, I wonder when my mom will get a bigger car, and he's like, the fuck? Like, and he's also like, your mom ain't got no car, she broke. And it's just this, and it is, like, one of the best parts of there's a couple of funny things that are, like, that the book doesn't, that you're like, okay, this person understands in-jokes and like, little moments.
Every once in a while.
He goes to, after she has a party with people at her apartment complex, he picks her up and he's like, we're gonna go to my house and we can put in floors. And they go, and as they're driving there and he's holding her hand, he's like, will you read me? Because he's asked multiple times about the letters she writes to Scotty, because he saw a page that said Dear Scotty, and he realizes, oh, and he's like, will you read me the one about the night Scotty died? And he's asked a couple times, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And she reads the 2 letters about that night and the aftermath. And so basically for like 2 chapters, we're just getting what the letters were.
Okay, I will say this. I am not heartless. This part actually did kind of work because you actually can feel some grief from her. Again, I think part of this is from the voice actresses, because the voice actress is very good. But like there is a certain extent to which like, okay, this actually does kind of work. It does kind of feel like she's writing this to Scotty, being just so sad, and there's a rawness to it. Partly because it's not actually happening on page. It's her describing it, so there's a little bit of a layer of...
And it has her judgments, her feelings about what she's done, how she knows his family hates her in ways that she hates herself because of what happened. And even though while they don't know the reason she fully hates herself, they know enough to judge her. And like, so there's a lot of that stuff that really adds to these scenes. And they are, like, for what they are, I think they work pretty well. It is just insane to think of her just reading this in like as he's driving. Like, oh man, this is such an intimate thing to do. She just pulls it up on her Google Drive. But anyway, and when they get there and he's just sitting in the car and then he opens it and he's like, I'm so sorry. And he says the craziest fucking thing, which is, I never realized how much you were grieving. You heard that a 21-year-old girl was involved in a terrible car accident that killed her boyfriend, and she's partially to blame. And you thought because she was in such shock post the thing that she just didn't emote or talk or like anything during the trial. And everyone there looked at that and just went, well, she's an unfeeling, cold-hearted bitch. And this entire time, Ledger's like, because like, there are points earlier where he's like, wow, she really loves DM. She really loves DM. But he's never like, wow, she probably really loved Scotty. And like, at no point does he think about any grief related to Scotty until she reads this letter. And it is wild to me that you wouldn't look at that and go, oh my god, that is a probably foundational traumatic thing that happened to her. They were in, by the way Scotty was talking to me about her, they were in a loving, happy relationship. They'd only been together 6 months. This was like they were in the like honeymoon stage hard.
One of the 2-star reviews on Goodreads is, this book has taught me that I should write down all the bad things I do in Google Docs, like a Word document, because apparently that'll fix it.
And it's insane to me that like because there's going to be a moment where Grace and Joe get to read one of these letters, and there's not even a moment when they're like, these are just words. We have no way to like. Yes. How do we know that this is true? Like, because like based on their, and I'll get there, and I'll complain about this then. But anyway, so because like at least Ledger knows her well enough to realize, oh yes, she does have a lot of grief. I've thought she's the saddest girl in school since I met her. So I kind of I get this.
Saddest girl in school.
Yeah, the saddest girl in school. And there's the part where he's like, when I met you, I thought you were the most compelling, and then the sexiest, and then I thought you were the saddest girl I'd ever met. And she's like, all 3, baby.
She also doesn't listen to music because sometimes it's sad. And at the end of the book, they have a playlist of songs that are only happy that he made her at one point. It's like the dumbest thing.
God, I forgot that. I literally forgot that.
It's so stupid. It's like, what?
Happy by Pharrell is on there?
It's Party in the USA. Like I get kind of how in text form this might work, but in an audiobook it's really weird to have the narrator just
read out
the
name
after the end of the book.
So they get to his house and they end up like they do the sexings on the floor, and they also put together, and he's like so impressed. She's shuffling around, banging in the floor things because they're putting in the laminate click-in. And she's banging them in.
Her boobs are very visible in the shirt.
She's wearing a tank top, and so when she bends down, she's also in a skirt and like sandals just bumping around the floor.
Yeah,
and he's just
so weird.
Like, they're doing this. And then his parents, who we know pop in random locations, randomly, go to the house that he is building, that they are not affiliated with at all, and walk in while he is on top of Kenna. They're not like fully, they're making out. And I'm like, listen, if this had been their house, where the house that they owned and lived in, that he then bought from them, and they use as a home base when they come back, absolutely. But I do not buy for a goddamn second that his parents just roll up to the house that he's not even finished building yet, and we're like, we're just gonna see it and walk in. We have a key. Why did you give them a fucking key? Anyway, so they walk in, and they realize who Kenna is, and they're like, listen, this is gonna blow up in your face, but we love you, and you're our son, so we support you with anything, but, maybe be careful. And he's like, okay, I've gotta deal with this. And so then they go back to her apartment, and they sleep, and then he goes back the next morning to his house across the street from Grace and Brian. Was his name Brian? I'm still gonna call him Joe. Grace and Joe. Yeah. Joe's house, and DM's like, hi, because he looks like you.
Again, tell me you've never met a kid without telling me you've never met a kid.
Joe is real angry, and he's like, oh shit, something's happened, and Joe's like, I need to talk to you. And basically, they went past her apartment complex for some reason when they were driving back from visiting Joe's mother's house for Mother's Day, and they saw his truck in Kenna's apartment complex parking lot, and they know that he's spending time with her and potentially doing other stuff. And Joe punches him twice, square in the face, and basically yells at him. And the outcome of this is you have to choose Kenna or your relationship with DM. And he's like, oh no. So he goes to Kenna's, and he picks her up from work, and she's got the busted up face, and they realize they have to end things.
He would always pick DM over anything, even her, who he loves so much.
Even though he's known her for 2 weeks at this point.
There's a point where he's like, oh, and I knew she had a good heart earlier in the book, and I'm like, we know how many lines of dialogue you have said to her, and it's under 50. I don't understand how you think you know this person.
And so they're like, we have to stop, because she's like, what happened to your face? And he was like, Joe. And she was like, oh no, they know. So they're like, they have to stop seeing each other. And she was like, this is it. I'm just gonna leave. And she had overheard a conversation where Roman said, Roman said to him, who the fuck are you kidding? You're not trying to help her leave. If that was the case, you're a former NFL player who owns a business and is building a giant ass house while owning a different house. You could have paid for her to leave ages ago. What are you? Who the fuck are you kidding? And Kenna overhears this. She thinks about it, and she realizes, because he's kind of trying to make it work a little bit, which doesn't, because we already heard from his point of view that he was going to end things. So then to be in her point of view, and he's kind of like, no, Kenna, don't say that, because she's like, give me money and I'll leave, and he's like, no, and she's like, this is what has to happen. It's done now, and she cries. And he kind of walks out, but then he comes back in, and then she's like, you need to leave. And she goes in the bathroom because she can't look at him leave. And she hears him he doesn't leave for a few minutes, and then he leaves, and she finally comes out of the apartment. And then we go back to Ledger's point of view, where he's immediately like, ha, bitches, that was a lie. 'Twas a subterfuge. Once Kenna went...
It is like that, yeah.
Once Kenna went into the bathroom to let him leave, he got her phone, went to her Google Drive, and sent all of the letters to Scotty to himself. Number one, I don't believe Kenna has that good of connection to do that quick enough that it wouldn't have still been loading.
Good point. No, it's totally good point.
Yeah, she doesn't have Wi-Fi. She's working off cellular, baby. Also, how did she afford an iPhone? Her first paycheck, which is a week, not even a full 2-week paycheck, a week, and she's able to buy an iPhone? Get the fuck out of here. I don't believe that for a second. But anyway, they decide to... he gets the letter, and he's like, I'm doing this. He goes to his house. He prints out the letter about Scotty's dad.
Better. He goes to Scotty's parents' house. He's like, hey, guys, what's up? can I see DM? And there's this whole part where like he says a thing that we all fully understand the meaning of, and then he explains what the meaning of it is for a paragraph. Colleen Hoover is not a good writer. He puts DM to sleep, and then he sends he has Joe's printer print the letter. That's what happens. It's I don't know why that just felt so gross to me that like, no, you're doing it in their house even?
Because he comes in and he basically makes it seem like he's chosen DM and he's done with the whole thing, which is also manipulation because he manipulates them into letting him in, thinking that he's made the decision because they're still kind of mad at him. False pretenses. And he basically comes out and he was like, listen, I've known you guys for years. You know I love DM. You know I loved Scotty. I would like 20 minutes of your time. I want you to, she's been writing letters to Scotty for the past 5 years, and I'd like you to read one of them. For 20 minutes, if you decide not to do it and not let her in, I will absolutely support that decision. I highly doubt that. Based on you coming in and making it seem like you were okay with the current decision and then springing this on them.
Well, also being unable to keep your dick wet for the last week, but whatever.
He's like, just read it, and I'm leaving, but just take 20 minutes and please read it. So he leaves. And then we cut to a chapter from Kenna's point of view where she wakes up and she's like crying and she's like, okay, I've gotta leave, blah, blah, blah. And he left, I think, his credit card for her. Which is wild because I don't think he left like what his PIN is or any of the stuff like that because like if she moves to another city and takes somebody else's credit, like it's wild. But anyway, she hears knocking on the door and she opens it and it's him. Like she opens it and she's like, go away, like we said we weren't seeing each other anymore. And he was like, can you open it just for a few minutes? And she's like, what do you want? And he was like, not to talk to me, to talk to. And it's Grace. And Grace is like, Grace comes in and then is like, I forgive you for everything. I read your letter.
It's so stupid. And she immediately is very motherly to her. It's like literally the conflict of this book is they hadn't realized that maybe Scotty's girlfriend was sad. Like, was also sad. It's a bizarre conflict.
And that she hadn't been terribly hurt by this whole situation, and that also, please note, she pled guilty to the manslaughter charge, which means at no point did she ever say to anyone she didn't do it. She never tried to defend herself. She was ready to die. Or in prison forever. She thought 7 years was not enough. You know? So at no point did she paint herself as someone who didn't care or who wanted to get out of this or who didn't want to face the consequences of her actions. So for them to just be like, ah, yes, you terrible cunt.
It's true. It's so weird. And like, the book at first has, it kind of makes you realize, okay, so what had happened is that she thought died, so she just walked away after she checked his pulse, but his arm had been cut off or something stupid like that. And then later, and so the way they see it is that she left the scene and showed up at home and was like, just like she had tried to run away and get away from the problem or whatever.
Which is insane because if that's what she'd tried to do, she wouldn't have been in her bed. Also, they tried to paint it as she was sleeping in her bed. Meanwhile, she wasn't in the bed when they busted in. There was a puddle because she literally fainted and hit her head and had a head wound and there was blood on the floor. And so I don't understand how any of their assumptions, like if I was running away from what I perceived to be my involvement and I didn't want to be like, you would not have found me in my house, motherfuckers. I would have been hiding.
So there's my sister is a criminologist. Shout out, but whatever your name is, I can't say it on here. But she is a criminologist and she did a lot of research on false confessions. False confessions, some of you guys have heard of. They're actually extremely common because the best way that a policeman can do his job for the prosecution is to get a confession, and then you don't necessarily need to have forensic evidence. It's treated like an ace in the hole, and so often they'll, and it's actually very easy for policemen to manipulate you into saying you did a thing you didn't do through various means. That should have been what happened here. It should have been a false confession situation where she actually had confessed, and then the parents had read her own words of what had happened. She's confessing to and been like, okay, that's legit then. She even says she did it and she's not expressing remorse in this victim statement or whatever. Like, that is a much more legitimate reason than like, I just didn't, she had a low affect in the courtroom.
Yeah.
What?
She didn't look sad, but she also didn't look like anything because she was in shock. Like, at no point is anyone like, maybe this 21-year-old girl is in shock from the death of the man or the boy she loved, you know? Nothing. And it's like, it wasn't until this moment that Grace realized that, like, oh my God, you did love her. Or you did love him, and you guys, like, and actually, you've been really sad, too. And you didn't actually leave him because you thought he was alive and you were trying to avoid the consequences of your, like, I'm sorry, if she had known he was alive and she didn't want to get in trouble, she would have called the cops, because dealing with a vehicle accident is better than dealing with manslaughter. Like, just in so many ways, the amount of rationale they give to her that is just insane. Yeah. Because what she did, I buy shock. I buy that she thought, because she touches his arm, she tries to talk to him, and there's no pulse. There's zero. It got squished in the door, so his arm was functionally dead. The rest of him was alive, arm dead. She checked. Unfortunately, she didn't know.
I actually, and I thought this was going to be the reveal, she was at some point going to be like, I actually don't know how I ended up in my apartment. It's completely blank. I don't know what I did. I don't know that if I checked or not. You know, I was too hot or whatever. Yeah. But, and then that would have been a more realistic, like, sequence of events, or at least emotionally more valid. Anyway, then they decide to take her home to see Diem. And, like, Diem is just immediately like, oh, hey, what's up? Your mom, my mom's back. That's cool.
And Grace and Joe are just, like, Grace is just full on board. Joe's a little hesitant until he sees the way Kenna and Ledger have been looking at each other. And if Ledger feels so strongly about her, then she has to be good. And then seeing her with DM, and she's just like a normal person, so they're like, oh wow, we've really vilified this absolutely normal, kind of like traumatized person. Wow. And it's like there's this point where she tries to apologize to Grace, and Grace hugs her and is like, listen, it's fine, we just move on from here. We forgive you. I hope you forgive us. And we just move on from no need, child. Even though I literally, I forgot to mention this. They got a restraining order against her, even though she didn't do anything. There was no reason to actually let a restraining order happen. They just happened to know one of the cops in this town who had it go through.
No mention of, like, you know, oh, maybe that's problematic. Like, oh, yeah, maybe that's a weird thing for you to do or not do. And, like, DM at one point crawls into her lap, which I kind of get in that, like, kids are kind of stupid, and it's a pretty lady.
And they're at
like,
4-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, she's tired. But, I mean, again, it's treated like they have this mother-daughter connection that's just very biologically essentialist, which I just don't love. Like, being a parent is about so much more than just popping the kid out. Like, it really is, and I wish this book would acknowledge that in some way.
This book ties up neater than a pretty... you know when you go to an apartment store at Christmas and they wrap your Christmas presents for you and they do a much better job than you ever could have done on your own? That's how neat this story gets tied up with a bow on it. Ledger decides, you know that house 20 minutes away that I've been building? Fuck it. We're going to stay close to Diem. We're going to be together and live in that house together. And we'll stay across the street because Diem's going to live with her grandparents. But we'll be there and we'll see her. And maybe she'll come and spend weekends. And then, you know, and then you get a fast forward to the future where she's having a child with Ledger. Mm-hmm. Diem's older, and they name the child Scotty, and it's like, wow, everything just... And she puts back... Oh, she puts back that cross that she took... before they have the other kid, she puts it back with Diem.
Which is so weird, because, like, why did you take it out then if you don't care? Like, I thought we did it because Scotty didn't like it.
And she goes, because sometimes, even though Scotty wouldn't have liked it,
oh, right, yes,
you know, it makes Grace happy, and that's it. It's for Grace, and that, like, it was always for Grace.
You idiot.
Until now to realize that, like, this woman was grieving over the death of her fucking son, so she had a memorial cross for him there. Like,
again, it's so the book is so conflict averse. It's amazing because I thought this was going to be melodramatic, and it's not really. It's just not even dramatic. Even it's the author having so many unconscious biases that she just can't really make the plot function. I thought you know, sometimes we read books and we talk about the good things in the books we don't like. So, for example, we've often said that Sarah J. Maas actually very good at writing action. Jenna Moreci, good at advertising her books. You know, like, we can give credit when it's due, but like, there's no strengths to this book.
Again, the only scene that worked for what it needed to do was the diary entry, the letter to Scotty that got read aloud.
No, that's true. That's the one scene that I was like, oh, okay, this is intense. Yeah. This is actually pretty intense.
And even then, I think it would have been worth more to be written to DM.
Yes. Oh, God, yeah.
And to be like a moment of, you know, this is me at my worst. This was my worst day, but I also want you to know this, and not just how your father and I were happy. Because I think you're right. I think the frame story of this being her letters to DM, and all of the initial ones being the good, happy stuff, the stuff about her, or like even talking about her mother and her relationship with her mother and how she wants a better one for them. But then it starts getting to like the uglier stuff, and then this being not only a climactic point for us, like, and especially I think what this book should have done is we shouldn't have known that she didn't know that he was like, we should have had no, like, she shouldn't have thought about that night in a way that it tells the reader that actually she was innocent the whole time and she didn't know he was still alive, and and this should be a moment where the reader finally gets to see what happens, because like I like those stories where you're like, is she actually, like, because again, this book never lets you think, oh, anything other than she's the goodest good girl who is heckin' sad. And having something like that where there's tension of, you know, obviously she's remorseful now and we're rooting for her because she's trying really hard, but did she perhaps, like anything like that? No, you know everything from the beginning, and I think that scene could have been better utilized, better done.
I would have liked it if it had been something like throughout the book you thought there was maybe more to the story going on, and then she tells DM, like, you know, truthfully, I don't know, I don't remember what happened. And
I have
like
I got nothing.
And like that would have been such a powerful moment of like of being truthful to herself. And that's the thing about this book, is that, like, it's weird because there's so many inherent things that could very easily make this a very good book, and Colleen Hoover does absolutely none of them. Yeah, and so I'm actually, again, I'm glad we did this one versus It Ends With Us, because that sounds like a complete... and some of the other books she's written just sound like complete shit shows. I sometimes have this thing where, like, I'll pick a book and then I'll be kind of anxious about it actually being worth reading or not. And, like, the one thing I don't want is for a book to be mediocre. It's okay for it to be very good or very bad, but I don't want it to just be boring. And there's an extent to which this is a boring book, but by virtue of being a boring book, I think it tells you a lot about Colleen Hoover as a writer.
It's funny. There's another one that I've seen a review of that she wrote, Verity.
I think. I've heard of this.
And Reads with Cindy did a video about it, and it was hysterical. But I'm also glad we did this one over that one, because I think that one has like a wild premise, like a wild fucking premise. and this one, I think you're right, picking something that is a little bit more straightforward to just assess, you know, was this a hard premise that, you know, because like sometimes we read books where I'm like, I think it would have taken a really, 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 really incredible once in a generation writer to pull off this premise. And so anyone else would have a hard time with it. And I think this is a reasonable enough premise that you can actually have a pretty accurate...
In certain ways, the conflicts write themselves if you're just willing to be emotionally brave enough to write characters who aren't perfect.
How did we never actually have a confrontation scene between her, Grace, and Joe? How did this entire book happen without that being a scene?
It's so bizarre because it's just like that is what the whole book is building up to. And then it's just like, well, psych, actually it happens off screen. They forgive her.
Just kidding.
So, are there any Colleen Hoover books you would like us to read? Would you like us to read Verity? If you would, like this video. I'm not kidding. It would really help the video out. If you guys also want, we could read a Colleen Hoover for the book club. I just didn't feel like putting people through that. But if you guys want to have a hilariously bad book for the book club, we could do that. I also didn't want to do It Ends With Us as a book club book.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, we also have books we like. You guys can check those out under our Yes We Like Books playlist. I'll at least put that in the description, if not the actual card that's up there or over there. And yeah, any final thoughts, Maria?
Nope, I think we did a good job. I think we said all the things.
We covered it. Okay, yep. All right, sign us out.
Thanks, guys. Bye!